changes. There are some major changes this coming fiscal year 2024, 2025. So I really wanted to go over that today. If you have any question, please interrupt or put it in the chat, and Brian can read it to us. Okay, so the major change is that regular merit file will be all become dean delegated. So before, as you may remember, all the assistant professor merit file and every other merit files of associate professor dean delegated, but some of them still go to CAP. But from this fall, all the regular merit files will be dean delegated, and it does not require AP-10 form. Okay, and but you can still request to be reviewed by CAP. So you still have an option. And then all the promotion advancement to step 6, mid-career appraisal, acceleration, above scale merit files, and all the files in the review cycle following any reappointment or no change only decision, they still have to go to CAP. And these are the Senate files that we're talking about. And so because of that, there will be some deadline changes. So now all the merit files will be deemed delegated. So the deadline will be December 2nd instead of October 3rd. But all the acceleration, including 1 year, 2 year, one-step, multi-step acceleration, advancement to step 5, mid-career appraisal, and these are still October 3rd. And promotion files are still November 1st. And so for the dean delegated review file, I said that you don't need to use AP-10, but you still have to use part of AP-10. So you can submit your CV and just highlight all new materials since the last review period ended, and that is sufficient. But you also still have to fill out the AP-10 DD, which is basically the section 2 of the AP-10 file, which is teaching and mentoring. And so now this shortened version, AP-10 DD, is also available at the website, and we can provide you as well. You can still choose to submit AP-10. In that case, you need to submit AP-10 June 24, the new version, because there are a couple of new things added to this. Okay. And for the dean delegated review file, you can add self-statement, but it should not be longer than 2-page total. And it is one reflective statement with short sections on research, service, and teaching, or maybe research and service, because you still have to submit your reflective teaching statement as well as students' evaluations as 2 pieces of evidence for teaching effectiveness. Okay, so these don't change. Just that you can submit CV with the highlighted area for the new materials. And for the CAP delegated files, you still have to use AP-10, and please use the new version, June 24. And also you need to submit your CV. So the CV contains your entire career information, and AP-10 should include only the review period information. And then lately, it became an issue that you have to make sure that the publication number assigned to a specific paper cannot change, and you need to match between CV and AP-10. And it cannot be changed across different merit review cycle, because sometimes CAP go back and look at the old merit reviews. And so even for the dean delegated file, even though you're not really asked to fill out AP-10, but my strong recommendation is that if you're relatively new to UCI and you still have your newest publication as number 1, I strongly suggest you flip it so that the oldest publication is number 1 and the newest publication is whatever the highest number that you assign for the publications. Then you don't need to worry about reflipping when the time comes to submit AP-10. Is that clear? And so that's one thing. And then also for the initial appointment, promotion, advancement, and then to above scale, a professor above scale require other letters. I'll come back to that a little bit later. And that for the CAP delegated review, you also need to provide 2 pieces of evidence for teaching evaluations, and the reflective teaching statement. And for this one, you also recommended to include personal statements because CAP really wants us to hear about the context. And in this case, it's less than 3 pages for in each statement. So research statement, service statement, and the teaching statement can be 3 pages max each. And the inclusive excellence diversity statement is only required for initial appointment, and the CAP prefer that this information included in the AP-10 in appropriate subsection. But if you're doing extensive diversity activities, then you can certainly get to the, you can certainly write the separate statement. Okay. And another things, new things that School of Medicine is implementing is that, as you may recall, last fall, the AP created a new above scale merit categories. They created a new one called above scale merit 1. And this is if you're doing excellent work in research and doing good performance in teaching and service, you can go for this merit. If you're doing great in 2 areas, including research and either teaching or service, you can go for merit 2. If you're doing great in all 3 areas, then you can go for merit 3. And so merit 2 and the merit 3, as well as initial advancement to above scale, will be reviewed by the School of Medicine Advisory Committees, ARAC, CXAC. All right, and I just wanted to reiterate that it's really, ultimately, it's a faculty member's responsibility to ensure that all the informations are included in AP-10 and accurate, and it really helps you, your career advancement. And you cannot ask analysts to extract information from CV and put it in AP-10 because AP-10 is far more intricate, and you really need to know the content in order to do this. And the analyst's job is to really review and make sure that information provided is within the review period and complies with the policy procedures. So it is really worth looking into carefully what you are submitting. And so these are the, if you go to this AP website for forms, there's a new AP-10 form and AP-10DD. These are Word file. When you download it, then I'll come back to that later. Okay. And so the AP-10, there is 5 sections, and the first one is just employment history, but 2, 3, 4, 5 basically reflect the 3 categories of the review criteria for career advancement. Section 2 is teaching mentoring, section 3 is research, and section 4 and 5 are both service. 4 is for professional service, and then 5 for university service. So these are the 3 areas. And also for those faculty members who have clinical duties, there will be a clinical competence force criteria that needs to be evaluated. And if you are adjunct series faculty members, then you're only required to do 2 out of 3 activities. And it's important that you talk to the chair so you have a good, perfect understanding agreement on which 2 criteria that you're focusing on. Okay. So this is the top part of this AP-10 addendum, and you need to fill out the correct review period, and you have to do this 5 times because each section there's the section break, so you cannot do this. You have to do it 5 times. And if you look at the footnote, make sure it says 0624, not 0622. That will be the old one. So the first one, section 1, is the employment history. And if you go to this faculty hub.ap.uci.edu and look at the employment, you can actually copy paste all this information here. And if you happen to be off scale, then they ask you to do, like, for example, step 3 OS for off scale. And if you have previous employment as a non-faculty in a non-faculty positions, you can put it here in a B. Section 2 is teaching mentoring, and the A is the didactic course, and B is actually new. Now we have overload courses taught at UCI. And again, if you go to the faculty hub and click teaching, then you can get this information that you can copy paste here. And the regular courses you need to underline, and any course teaching courses that you have teaching evaluations attached, you can put asterisks here. And overload course, for example, these are your regular courses in a department, but you are asked to give a special lecture in another course, you can add that in here. And it became an issue, and I just wanted to mention that make sure that the number makes sense. So if there are 4 instructors evenly covering the whole course, then the percentage taught should be 25%. Make sure that those number matches. And but for example, if you only give 1 lecture and other instructors give more, then I mean you can explain your contribution. Always you can write a short sentence underneath to explain. And these should be listed in chronological order. Recommendation is newest at the top, but you could do the opposite, but just make sure they are chronologically ordered. Okay. The section 2, C and D, these are for faculty members with clinical teaching. And so C is for medical students. And then D is for residents and fellows. This one said there's a typo in the new AP-10 form, says skip to section D means actually E. And so C and D for the clinical teaching. And please do not list the names of students, residents, and fellows in here, but do list the dates or service, number of students, residents, and fellows. Oh, I'm sorry. Nimisha, would you like to step in here?
No, keep continuing. This is
No,
perfect.
no, it's okay. Go ahead. I'm so sorry.
So as you guys, for the clinical faculty, if you are doing ward service, hospital rounds, this is where you would put what dates you're doing it. So for example, in GI, I may do 4 weeks of service. I would put those dates. I would put the number of hours I spent teaching, how many students I had, how many residents, and how many fellows I had as well. But do not put the names of the students here at all. Okay, keep going, Kyoko.
Okay. And also, if you happen to give lectures that for both medical students and residents and fellows, the CAP does not like duplicated information. So instead of copying the same information in C and D, just put it in one of the section and explain that, hey, this was also attended by medical students, residents, and fellows. And this is true for clinical ex-faculty members who have clinical duties as well. Okay. Would you like to, Nimisha, would you like to talk about this?
Sure. So with the clinical teaching, we do all different types of clinical teaching. We may do ward service, we may do teaching in the clinics. That you would also include in the AP-10 if you have a student. If you are a PACE preceptor, this is something you would put here. It is important that you confirm with your department and or division that the medical student and resident and fellow evaluations are being obtained. You are not responsible for obtaining them directly, but your unit should have it in place. And it is important just to report the hours, as we said earlier as well.
Yeah, and then for example, VA, sometimes it's difficult to get enough responses, and then I mean you could get letters solicited from the colleagues about the teaching, but you do need the 2 pieces of evidence, including the evaluation and the reflective teaching statement. So please be careful. And also, there are so many activities, so I strongly recommend that you keep record of whenever you give a lecture, grand rounds, just keep records so that you don't, so you can fill it out. And this is not going to be in the faculty hub, so you have to be responsible for the record keeping. Okay, so moving on to
Can I interject real quick? Sorry.
Yeah.
Can we go back a screen?
one more?
Oh, no, this is fine.
Okay.
I would just say that the exception to the evaluations works on occasion, but it should not be used as a repeated exception, merit after merit after merit to promotion, because eventually cumulative portfolio that's being looked at for promotion or an MCA or an advancement needs to have some type of formal evaluation in there, whether it's students, residents, trainees, CME, grand rounds. So I think the exception is looked at as an exception. And I'm sure, that's what was meant here, but it's important to understand if your department is not collecting evaluations for you, that's a conversation that needs to happen. And, we're giving feedback to chairs and departments this year about files and faculty and departments that are consistently not obtaining evaluations that could be negatively impacting future, positive actions for their faculty members. So it's an important discussion to have with either the education team, coordinator, manager, the department analyst, the chair, the division chief, to make sure that evaluations are being collected for your teaching activities.
Good. Okay, and move on to so this is the graduate student mentoring, so either for PhD or PharmD students. And make sure that the thesis defense and advancement exam happen within the review period. And if you have a rotation students, you can list here, down here as well. And write your role, either chair or member. Sorry. Okay, and then here I wanted to mention that if you help the undergraduate students get fellowship, scholarship, or Europe award, please document here. And this is a really good evidence for your mentoring excellence. And so it's important for the evaluation. And please do not put those in the grant section in the section 3. And then I'm sorry, just put it here. And for the other research and teaching supervision, you can list your lab personnel because you're supervising them, and also any visiting scholar students. And CAP asked to provide some description of the nature and the duration of your teaching and mentoring here. And also, can I get rid of this? Can you see it?
What are you, we see your pointer.
Do you see okay, can you see the last line, clinical faculty?
The residents and fellows who you do your research.
On my screen, it's blocked by the bar. Okay, yeah, so here you can also list the residents and fellows that you mentored. Okay.
Can I add something right there?
Yeah.
On that last part under number 5, so for clinical faculty, if you are supervising clinical research for a trainee, this would be the section to put it in, and what your role was, and what your project was, and how you mentored them.
Right.
That's other research or teaching supervision?
Right.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Thanks.
Right. They're not postdoc. Yeah. Okay. And also teaching awards. So if you receive any teaching awards, or if you are teaching some extra things like a summer research program, or you serve as a judge for poster, you can put those in here. And then if you revamp or develop a new course, you can certainly document here. And oh yeah, I forgot to mention, so when you have the Word file of the AP-10, if you hover your mouse over this colored letter with underline, there's a pop-up menu that gives you further details of what you put here. So for example, here it said asterisk items. If you develop new material, if you included that in this file, you can put asterisks on this to show that, hey, I included the information in file.
The other thing for clinical faculty on that section is, let's say, I know a lot of training programs are now creating podcast series for teaching clinical things. This is something you could put here, or if you've created a website for your training program, this would be the area to put that in as well.
Okay, and these are last 2 sections. So first, this H is the the professional development activity related to teaching. So this is not something that you organize, but this is something that you attended to improve your teaching skills. And the CAP recognize your effort to improve your teaching effectiveness. So you should definitely put that any course that you have taken in here. And then the diversity related to teaching, you can write something here. And I'll come back to this these diversity activity things later. But what's one thing important is that please do not put any specific names of the diversity minority students. The file will be returned to the department.
And Kyoko,
Okay.
can I add one more thing on that?
Yeah.
Section H under professional development. So for clinical faculty, especially for those who are new, most of you have to attend at least the first year the graduate medical education workshop, usually either in the fall or the spring. This would be the section to put that in under professional development activities related to teaching.
Okay, sounds. Can you add that to the example form? Okay. Okay, so this is just a summary from the AP. Basically what CAP's looking for is in a reflective teaching statement is the not the list of what you taught, but your teaching philosophy, any innovation, but also addressing any negative comments from teaching evaluation. I still see some faculty members just ignore those and focusing on positive reviews, but CAP really just want to see how responsive you are to these negative comments. So you don't need to be perfect teacher. Always there's some negative review. So what they just want to see is that you recognize this and try to improve in response to those negative comments. So you should just mention that. Okay, and then for the teaching evaluations, you need just the last 5 years, especially for promotion and advancement. Your review area year period is longer than 5 years sometimes, but you just need to have the latest 5 years. Okay. All right, and moving on to section 3, research and creative activities. And so 3A is the list of publications that are not previously reviewed. And here, so make sure that first of all, those publications are within the review period, and you happen to have some publications that were never included in the previous review, you can list it here, but just explain underneath that, hey, this was never included in the previous review because blah, 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 and then that's fine, you can list it, but you need to stipulate that. And what CAP's really looking for is whether publication is peer-reviewed or not. Honestly, if they're not peer-reviewed, they don't, it doesn't count that much. And so you need to really stipulate which publications are peer-reviewed. And the CAP becomes much more strict about separating the review articles and the original research articles. I know some people have separate lists, like number 1, 2, 3 for the research paper and R1, R2 for the review article, for example. But many people have them all in a one list. It's okay, but you need to stipulate this is review, this is review, this is review, and these are the research articles. And I've seen the file got returned from CAP to kind of clearly mark that. So please make sure to do that. Okay, and this is a small things, but I highly recommend you put your name in a bold letter because it's just so much easier for the reviewer to find your name, okay? And CAP also recognized that, so it's important that to highlight if you're corresponding or co-corresponding authors, right? And then you should stipulate that, especially for assistant professor going for promotion. But also CAP recognized team research. So if you are middle author, just give a few sentences underneath, explain your critical contribution to the paper as a middle author, right? And not just say minor, moderate, but CAP wants to know the context. So for example, if this research was not possible without me providing the clinical, critical clinical specimens, then you should say that, right? So that's the kind of content that you should provide. And I also wanted to mention that sometimes people include bioarchive paper, and these are need to be clearly marked as non-peer reviewed because they're not. The bioarchive paper nowadays, it's even cited in PubMed. And sometimes if you feel you don't have enough publications, but you want to show that you have this trajectory, you could include bioarchive, but make sure you stipulate that. And the important thing is that you have to use the same numbering for bioarchive paper once they become peer review publication. You cannot assign two different numbers. That will be considered double dipping. And so in the one review cycle, you listed as a bioarchive paper in a section 3A. And then the next review cycle, that paper might have gotten published in a peer review journal. Then that should go into the section 3B, which is previously submitted in a prior review, and explain underneath, hey, this was initially listed as a bioarchive paper, but now it went through peer review and then finally published, which is fine. And then just explain that. And if you don't want the complication, and if you feel you have enough publications, I would not list the bioarchive paper, okay? And then just make sure do not assign two different numbers to the bioarchive and the real paper. Okay.
Kyoko, can you go back to the previous slide? There
Yeah.
was a question. For you said to list out peer-reviewed articles versus reviews.
So
For
peer
HS
reviewed,
faculty, for HS faculty, is that as important? And maybe Dr. Helmy can
Yeah.
comment on that.
right, okay.
And then can you also explain bioarchive? Some of us on HS don't understand that as well.
Sure, okay. Mohammed, would you like to comment?
Yeah, sure. So it's not as critical for HS faculty as it would be for Senate to separate out the type of publication, but I think it could help if you're trying to make a case that the accomplishment is more significant. So if you're trying to distinguish a series of case reports or reviews from ones that are, more investigator initiated, peer-reviewed, groundbreaking publications, it would serve a better purpose to highlight those as separate and distinct, so they don't get clumped in with the others and diminished in their value. So while it's not as mandatory as it would be for the Senate files, it does help in some cases.
Okay, and then bioarchive is the mechanism that you can deposit your initial paper. And these are just as long as they are forming the paper format, it takes 2 days for them to approve it to publish. And then, but they are clearly non-peer reviewed. And then people can, actually bioarchive can forward this paper to the peer reviewed journals. It's okay to do this way, because sometimes for us, it takes like 2 years to publish. And then the bioarchive is considered publications, so people can cite those papers, but they are nevertheless not peer reviewed. So a lot of people, especially big shot people, tend to deposit their paper in the bioarchive first. Okay, so, and then section 3B, normally only used for promotion and advancement, that you include the paper that were reviewed previous in a merit cycle, but within the review period. Okay, and this is just, I already talked about this in merit and promotion webinar in April, so I'm not going to go into too much details, but these are like tips for like try to highlight the significance of publications.
Can you go back one more slide? So under here for artistic and professional performances and exhibits, things that we would potentially include would be if you're doing like videos that are getting published or promoted as research, that could be something here that you could include as well.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so I just wanted to add that under artistic and professional creative works.
Sounds good. And then, so if you have a professional online system resources, if you have a patent, you can list them there. And for inline in residence, it's really important to show that you can get extramural funding, because that's evidence for the professional recognition. And if you want to, and you want to have PI and PI, like showing the leadership in the project. So the CAP become much more strict about the funding. So if you're co-I, they'd like you to stipulate the percentage effort or allocated resources. So this is actually a bad example. If you're co-I, obviously you're not getting $2.3 million. So it's important that you show what percentage effort going into this, or how much of that money actually come to you. And also, they asked that rather than number, write some short descriptive grant title and also spell out the acronym of the funding agencies. Obviously, NIH and NSF is pretty well known, but there are other funding agencies that are only well known to the people in that field. And so it's for the CAP review, it's helpful if you spell it out, okay? And also, as I said before, don't list the grants and fellowship awarded to the trainee here, because if you're serving as a mentor, it will be should go into the section 2. And here, just make sure you put the amount and indicate if it's a total, a direct, and duration, and all this, provide all the information. Oh, sorry. Okay, and oh yeah, if you have a current research protocols that have IRB approval but has not been funded, please don't list it here, but you can list in your research statement. All right, and this is some bullet points from AP on the research and scholarly activity. Again, CAP is looking for context, and just try to explain in a personal statement the impact and research activity impact and leadership. Okay, so I think I'm not going to go into this too much here.
Kyoko, can you go back to the slide on the amounts here? There are a few questions.
Yeah.
There's one question about how you would put it if you were a co-investigator for the amount, or how you would list the contract and grant. Like percentage wise, should you say the role, like your example, NIH R01 co-investigator?
So what I would do is, you can always put an explanation underneath in a sentence, right? So what I would do, you could still put the total amount to demonstrate the scale of the grants, but then you can stipulate underneath that, hey, my contribution is 0.2% and allocated money is this for me, or I only do this part of it or something. I think just provide some information underneath.
And the direct amount means for that faculty member's portion, and the total is for the entire grant.
Right, but I mean, sometimes the direct
that's not
that clear, right?
Direct costs means
direct cost is not.
Yeah.
Sorry. Go ahead.
Go ahead, Kyoko.
No, go ahead, Jeff. I'm sorry.
Well, total cost is including indirect costs, which are the overheads that go to that don't go to the PI. So direct costs are what goes to the PI team, be it MPI, COI, whatever. In total means direct and indirect costs.
Right. Right.
And if you're a COI, you'll have a budget, or you'll have part of the budget. You might be $50,000 of the 2.3 million. So as Kyoko said, put down, there's a $2.3 million grant. My portion of it is 50,000 or whatever it is.
Right.
Then then it's you being honest, but also showing them, as Kyoko said, the importance and magnitude of the entire grant as well as your component.
Right. Great. Okay. Okay, and moving on to the next section. So, okay, so then again, if you are, for example, attended NIH bootcamp to improve your grant writing skills, you can put it here in professional development activities. And if what you did is something related to diversity, you can write here. So, for example, if your minority students publish paper, then you can list it here, but please do not put their names, right? And also, if your research project is directly focusing on the health disparity, for example, you can discuss it here. Okay, moving on to the service. So section 4 is professional service, and here, so for the clinical competence, the easiest evidence is if you actually recognize as a best doctor or physician of excellence. So please make sure to list those. And membership, professional membership. Oh yeah, and if you're elected to be a fellow, that's also an honor, so you should list that there. And the professional membership, you can also write your board certification here, because that's also considered part of the clinical competence. And now this is a new section. So the presentation at UCI needs to be listed separately now. So this is the invited presentation. And if you're invited to give a seminar at another department or the center or some mini symposia at UCI, you should list it here in the presentation at UCI. And if you're invited to elsewhere, then you can list it here. And then also, if you're invited to professional meetings, then you can list it here. And the regular meeting, like you submit abstracts, you should list those down here. And if your abstract was chosen for oral presentation, still you should not go in here, but just stipulate that here, because that's also very nice. But it's not strictly you're not invited, so make sure that they're not listed here. Okay. All right. And if you if you make media appearances, asked to do interview, or if there's a professional articles written on your work or for yourself, then you can mention it here. And all right. And then if you are like serving on the committees for professional societies, or if you are organizing meetings or served as the chair of the session, you can list it here. All right, and if you are editor or reviewer for journals, and if you are either the standing member or ad hoc member of the grant review study sections for NIH or other funding agencies, you can put it here. Because these are also evidence for professional recognition, because you're asked to do this as an expert. All right, and if you are serving as a consultant for industry or government, you can list here either paid or pro bono. And also community service, community outreach activities. And again, if you are attending some leadership development course series or something like that, if you are selected to attend this professional development series, you should list those here. And diversity activities. So for example, if you are in a minority affair committee for the professional society, then you can certainly list it here.
Also, just a tip, you can also add, like, if you've attended a lot of these monthly on Mondays series, you can add that as part of your faculty development.
Do you want to list it here or in next section?
You could do it here or either or.
Okay. Okay, so the section 5 is a university service. And I have to say that the clinical ex-faculty member, at least as I see, sometimes they leave these sections kind of blank. But I know you're doing a lot of work. And if I look at their CV, there's more information. So please take time and then make sure you fill out this section 5. So your effort will be properly recognized. So there are different levels. So the university system-wide is like a UC-wide committee. And I have a slide on the clinical side, and the campus-wide, if you're a Senate, then you can be serving on the committees. And school of medicine committees, you can list it here. And also the hospital committees, you put it under the school. Okay, and then I'm sure you're doing a work for the department and the division, you can list it down here.
Just to add, like, if you have a title in your department or division, that would be the section to put it in,
right,
under department here.
Okay. Okay, and then again, professional development series. So the School of Medicine Leadership Academy, you can list it here or in the previous section, as Nimisha said. And the diversity activity, yeah, if you're doing something directly related to DEI, you can certainly list it here. And so this is the little tip from AP. And basically, as you get more senior faculty, the certain level of leadership is required. And so not just listing bunch of committees, but you may want to serve as a chair to show some leadership in these activities. And this can be further highlighted in the personal statement on service. Okay, so Nimisha, would you like to?
Yes. So for clinical faculty, there's other things you may be doing, as we said, mention it under the School of Medicine section and put UCI Health or your division. So let's say if you're doing university-wide, let's say you work on EPIC, EMR, and you are doing high-level work across the different UC systems with EPIC, you could list it under university section. If you're doing campus-wide work, let's say you're working with the School of Nursing or the School of Pharmacy, Public Health. If you work with this Integrative Health Institute, this could be something you could put there. For School of Medicine, if you're interviewing medical school student applicants or sitting on a committee for that, you would put it here. If you are on a search committee, this would be an area of service that you could put under School of Medicine. If you are doing anything for the hospital, any hospital-based committees, you want to put that under School of Medicine or the hospital part. If you are doing, for example, tumor board or interdepartmental meetings, I would put it under School of Medicine, UCI Health Hospital. Another area, if you're doing a lot of work with education, such as the Program Evaluation Committee or the Clinical Competence Committee for your training program or a wellness committee, you would want to put that under division and departments. And you can, as Dr. Helmy wrote in the chat, for this, you can just create a subsection under the School of Medicine's section and put School of Medicine Medical Center and Health Enterprise and list it there.
Right. And this is applicable to Clinical X faculty member as well. All right, and then I just wanted to reiterate the Clinical X series because it's so unique to University of California, and it does emphasize clinical duties, teaching, as well as creative output. And even though it's non-tenure track, and then the research expectation is not quite the same as the tenure track faculty, but nevertheless, they are expected to lead and have a significant intellectual and substantive contribution to a research program and or involving other type of creative activities. It can be broad, but you need to have some significant intellectual substantive contribution and leadership. So that's really important to advance in this series. And extramural funding is desirable but not required. But if you look at the senior Clinical X faculty members, they usually have a long list of industry-funded clinical trials or clinical research, if not NIH. And then I could be highly integrated with the clinical activities, and it could be anything. But the key is it's peer-reviewed, and then you have the leadership in this activities. And okay. All right, and then I just wanted to quickly mention diversity because CAP does recognize diversity, but primarily they encourage candidates to include this work in the AP-10 and appropriate subsections. But if you're doing extensive work or if you research directly focus on this, you can have a separate section. And this is the sort of the example from the section 2, teaching and mentoring. So for example, if you say, I supervise 5 URM and 7 female students, or this is okay, but it's so-so, and absolutely no names. But it's like you're not doing anything, and they happen to come to your lab, right? But if you actually say that, hi, I have these students, and I specifically help them to apply for diversity fellowship, then that's actually better. And even better is that if you venture out and do outreach activities to actively recruit those people, and then you recognize that the specific mentoring tailored towards challenge specific to these different groups, and then I help them get these fellowships, that's excellent. All right, and the personal statement for the CAP delegated merit, the review, it should be less than 3 pages, but honestly, maybe 2 pages is better. And just they want to see the context, right? And research statement, just make sure you explain your significant impact of your study and define your contribution in team science. And rather than going into details of your project, because remember, CAP is consistent of some schools that are not in the biomedical sciences. There's no point of going into scientific details. And okay, so I think that's that here. And I just wanted to mention that fall 2022 is watermarked for the UAW strike. So if you feel that you are negatively impacted on this, just mention that in your personal statement. And I just wanted to talk about external letter quickly. So 4 to 5 external letters required. And so for the department, if you receive like less than 1-page letter, it's supposed to be analytical. If you get a really short letter, you might as well send back or ask for another letter because chances are you might be asked to provide additional letters. Okay, and the 3 letters must be department nominated, non-conflicted. And for clinical X, especially, I think it's critical to have a letter from another UC campus or 1 or 2 UC campuses. And it's better to have different UC campuses than multiple letters from same UC campus. And okay. Oh, yeah. And then the letter writer must be higher than your current rank. So if you're assistant professor going for promotion for associate, you cannot get the letter from assistant professor. And also, the CAP became more detail oriented and sent back the file to fill in the details regarding the connection of the letter writer to the candidate in AP-11, which is the list of these letter writers. And so please make sure to fill that out. And also try to avoid selecting reviewers from the previous action, like the same set of people from the promotion from assistant associate to the associate for professor. Just please choose different people. And another thing was that for maybe HS clinical, it's okay, but for the clinical X and then other Senate, letters from UC faculties even in a different departments or school, they're considered conflicted. So just keep that in mind.
Kyoko, can you go back to your previous slide just to reiterate to everybody one more, this one. Please do remember, do not provide drafts to any of your letter writers. That is not acceptable. And then really do understand what conflicted is. If you have your mentors are conflicted forever and collaborators are conflicted for 4 years. So please do keep that in mind as you generate your letter list for yourself, and then as the department generates one as well.
And there should be no direct communication between the faculty and the letter writers. So, okay. All right, and this is from the latest AP slide. So just a tip for the department chair, dean letters, and so the chair should not sign the department letter, and the chair's letter is not required, but the CAP appreciate the chair's letter providing additional view, especially for acceleration, promotion, and advancements. Okay, and again, adjunct to series only require 2 out of 3 activities, so it'll be nice to clarify which 2 areas that they're focusing on in a department letter. And also clinical competence, other than these awards, there's no other data in the AP-10. So the department letter really need to address the clinical competence. And also if you're doing acceleration, the department letter should also identify which 2 of the 3 areas that these the candidates excel to justify the acceleration. So acceleration, yeah, this is also the latest AP-10. AP slides. It said that for acceleration, you have to have research creative activity as a required bucket with another second, either service or teaching. So research and creative activity volume and impact twice as high, evidence of leadership. And the second bucket, service volume impact twice as high, evidence of leadership. And teaching, mentoring, the volume does not have to be twice as high, but impact does, and evidence of leadership. So just keep this in mind. And if the department support for acceleration is mixed, please have the departments have two votes, 1 vote for acceleration and a second vote for normal action. Okay. And just wanted to show you that the success rate of acceleration, so fiscal year 22-23, 23% of total faculty file went to CAP was acceleration request, and only 38% success rate. And this year I haven't tallied yet, but it might be even lower because CAP, I feel like CAP is more strict. And so you really need to talk to the chair and then consider if there's anything sufficient for acceleration in the 2 areas, not just the research. And also, it's going to be harder to accelerate into major steps like promotion, advancement to step 6 or above scale. And also, if you got hired in a higher step of assistant professor, so by the time promotion and try to accelerate, you might ended up proposing to accelerate into associate professor step 4, which is like the senior part of associate professor overlapping with the professor step 1. So this will be much harder. Okay. And the last thing is that I wanted to just, for the assistant professors, if you are hired before June 30th, 2022, you are eligible for 2 COVID stop the clock. And together with 1 family stop the clock, you could have 3 stop the clocks to delay your promotion. And our recommendation has been to do the proper paperwork to get approved for stop the clock, and you may not need to use them. Okay. All right. And so the last website here is the new AP-10 addendum and AP-10 DD for the section 2 only for the dean delegated merit. All right. Thank you so much.
All right, Kyoko, that was great. We do have a couple of questions in the chat that we'll just kind of, I'll return to, and then if we're missing some, we'll come back to it. So one of the earlier questions was, are bioarchive papers allowed? We've kind of covered that. Yes, they are allowed. The issue being that they haven't been peer reviewed. So if you include a bioarchive paper, you gotta make sure you keep the numbering the same for when it does get accepted. And B is if you've used it for one promotion or one review cycle as a bioarchive paper, when it becomes peer reviewed and accepted, you've already used that paper. So the next review cycle, it's not going to get the same credit as if it had never been seen before by CAP or by review. Next question was, for HS clinical folks, is a research statement required if we're submitting a clinical service statement? And Mohammed answered that in the chat, saying that no, it's not required, but if it'd help you, you go on and do that. Another question was, what forms of teaching evaluations are acceptable? Can a speaker evaluation form from a didactic lecture to UCI learners count? And what if these evaluations are not collected by your department? So do you have advice? I've told people, if you don't know that an evaluation is being collected, at a minimum, collect it yourself. The problem is that collection of your own is contaminated. It's not an anonymous evaluation. So you're much better off talking to your department or talking to somebody else who you're teaching the course with and asking them to make sure that evaluations are happening for you. But Kyoko or Mohammed, do you guys have any advice on that, especially for clinical folks?
Yeah, Mohammed.
Sorry, Brian, I was responding to a chat question. Can you repeat? I wasn't listening, sorry.
Sure. So how does someone in the HS clinical series get teaching evaluations other than a form that might happen as a didactic class? But what are other ways to get qualified teach evaluations other than doing them yourself, which is not as impactful?
Yeah, so departments should be collecting, and I think, this is Office of Med Ed requirement in GME, they should be collecting evaluations for medical student teaching, whether it's didactic, ward rounds, clerkships, simulation sessions, workshops. They should be collecting evaluation for resident and fellow teaching as well. And again, that could be ward rounds, lectures, conferences, simulations, workshops, etc. So there are embedded within the training programs methods if somebody is actively engaged in teaching medical students, residents, fellows, to collect evaluations through the department. Oftentimes the challenge is the department collects evaluations, but may not include all the faculty in the evaluation survey. So a resident may rotate with 10 different faculty over the course of 2 months or a month, but only 5 of them are evaluated in the survey that goes out by the department. So the faculty member hopefully would reach out and say, I've had residents rotating with me, and I want to make sure that I'm included in the evaluation survey that goes out. So there should be embedded within the process already methods for that to happen without the faculty member having to solicit trainee evaluations themselves directly.
And related to that, Mohammed, while we still have you, is like, what if your division, for example, HEMONC, doesn't provide fellow evaluations because they're protecting the confidentiality of the fellows?
Well, so all evaluations have confidentiality taken into consideration. There are potential dilemmas where there's only one fellow, for example, and maybe there's a fellow this year, there's no fellow next year, and you can deduce that any evaluations that are collected in that 2-year period would be from that one fellow. Those are exceptions that need to be discussed maybe with the department chair and the division chief, and I've reached out to some of the department chairs to advise them of different ways to collect evaluations. So faculty can engage in lectures, didactic lectures, grand rounds. They can contribute to curriculum development. These are other ways to contribute to the teaching mission if they really truly are limited in how many evaluations can be collected on their behalf because of a limited number of trainees. Generally speaking, most programs will have enough trainees that it can be accumulated over a 2-year period and retain some anonymity. But there are a few exceptions that are real, and so those need to be addressed directly with the division chief or the department chair, and we would address those on a case-by-case basis.
Also, for the basic, if you're invited as a guest lecturer, I would make sure to talk to the course organizer to get the evaluations.
So another question was, if, let's say you had a doctoral student, can you list them multiple times? For example, when they rotated, then when you were on their advancement committee, and then finally they've gotten their PhD. Where do you only list them once, or can you list them multiple times, Kyoko?
I think it's okay to list multiple times if that happened within the review period. I don't know, Jeff, what do you think? Because that's what happened, right? I mean, advancement and the thesis defense.
Yeah, in that case, I'd listed something like, advancement committee, thesis defense, thesis committee, something like that. So you're listing a committee activity, right? Just so happens to be the same student, but I think that's, as long as you're very clear.
Right.
And in a similar vein here, Munjal asks, where do we list mentees' achievements to show mentoring effectiveness, like that they got a poster award or travel award?
That could be in the teaching statement.
In the teaching statement, but not on the AP-10 form necessarily?
You can write under the person and the, in the section 2, you list those people, right? You can write it underneath of those students' name.
And somebody else asked in the chat, well, I thought we can't list student names. And so the point is not that you can't list people's names. People's names are on papers, on publications, is you're not flagging an individual as a member of a protected group.
Oh, yeah. I mean, you can and you should list students' name for the mentoring in a PhD, in a graduate mentoring and undergraduate. As I showed the example, you just cannot discuss them as under the URM or diversity students in the diversity section.
Right. Now, I don't know if we'll get to all of this question, but one question asked is about, I had a paper on bioarchives, but when it finally got published, it's 80% new and different and new and improved. My short response to that, not knowing the details, would be one might list something like that twice, but you'd have to do it by indicating this was bioarchive listed as number 77 and number 81 is similar paper with different title. It used to be 77, but now this paper has 80% new data, and so I'm claiming it is new. So at least you're being upfront and honest about it and letting CAP come down on whether they want to count that as a new pub or an old pub.
But in the CV, you list your peer-reviewed publications, so the bioarchive should not be like listed in there anyways.
Well, so some people do number their bioarchive papers as their 10th or 12th paper, but that's not recommended. I would keep them separate until they're formally accepted.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. I think that is most of the questions that are in the chat. If I've missed some, I apologize. Maybe you could retype them.
You have any questions? You can
Or unmute yourself and shout.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, I do have a question, which is part of the chat and I actually emailed previously, so I'm sorry to take people's time. There is this one paper that I actually reported, including my last review. And this paper, I play a small role it was with my postdoc mentor, but then this because of the first author, we retracted this paper, and now I want to know how do I format this, and actually how do I report this, and in what document that I need to address with the explanation, CV and also AP-10. Thank you.
Sorry, Lulu, I've actually been out for a little bit with a medical issue, and I do recall, now that you mention it, I recall your email. I will in a more sober moment look at it and give you more detailed advice.
Okay.
The short
Thank you
answer
so
is
much.
I didn't know the answer when I read your email, so when I don't know the answer, I can't answer right away, and I got to go
Okay.
think on it.
Thank you. Thank you.
Jeff, what do you think? If the paper is retracted, I mean, you can explain that in the research statement, I guess, but
Yeah, and also it depend whether the paper was published during the review period, current review period, or not as well. Because if you publish during the current review period, you'd have to think about how you want to message it versus afterwards. But it's good to be upfront. It's always good to just be transparent.
Yeah, so I'm thinking if you have a set of 20 papers numbered and this was paper 18, I don't want to renumber my papers. So I would just leave it and say that paper 18 has now been retracted and 20, 21, and 22 are my new papers. But I'll send you a more direct email later.
Thank you so much.
it's really important that the number cannot be changed across multiple merits. So you really have to keep that same. Yeah.
Yeah.
Any other questions? Okay, so
Thank you, everyone. We will send out a sample AP-10 form to everyone who registered and links to this webinar when the recording is posted online.
good.
And thanks to the analysts who helped answer questions in the chat, and also to Sophie for hosting this and recording us.
All right, thank you so
Good
much.
evening.
Bye.